Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, it's Summer Adventure with Quebec's Whales, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Eleanor Edye. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Over to you, Eleanor.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks everybody for tuning in today. Like Rob said, my name is Eleanor Edye, and I'm here to talk to you about one of our wonderful trips that I've been lucky enough to start guiding, our summer Quebec Whale and Nature Trails itinerary. A few words about me really briefly to start us off with. I've been an expedition leader with Natural Habitat for 5 or 6 years now, and I'm one of our Canada-based guides. Along with our Churchill programs, one of the other programs that I work on as an expedition leader is the Quebec Itinerary. This is a fairly new trip. The first ones ran last fall, so it's still very much something new and exciting to a lot of us here, and I'm very excited to be here with you today to get a chance to highlight this particular trip. So we'll get right into it, and I want to start off by kind of zooming in on Quebec, the St. Lawrence River, and taking you through the trip piece by piece, as well as talking a little bit about specifically the whales that we encounter and some of the conservation initiatives that are happening in the St. Lawrence River, even at this very moment. So here's a lovely map for us of Canada, as well as the northern US. And I went and put a star on Quebec City just to kind of firstly orient you as to where we're talking about in the world. If you've traveled up to Canada before or even to Quebec, it may already be familiar to you. But Quebec City is located in the southeastern part of Canada, and it's quite an accessible location. It's very close to the Canada-US border, and it is accessible by plane. They have a smallish airport there that does receive some international flights. Most of the time that people fly in, you might connect through Toronto or Montreal to get there because the Quebec airport's fairly small. But you can also access Quebec even by driving directly from the US or on the Via Rail train network. So you can theoretically take the train to Quebec if you like. There are commuter trains that run there multiple times per day. So it's a lovely, close, accessible location while still being in a different country than the US is. Our trip begins as well as ends in historic Quebec City. So Quebec City is it's a really fantastic, really interesting location. It's one of the oldest European settlements in Canada, founded in 1608. At the time of its founding, it was actually called Stadacona, and it was founded by intrepid explorer Samuel de Champlain. These days, we have around 540,000 people in Quebec City. It is the capital city of the province of Quebec. Now, I think an important part of orienting to Quebec in general, firstly, if you've traveled to Canada before, you're probably already aware that we have 2 official languages at the country level in Canada. So if you're ever interacting with our federal government, you fly in, you've got to go through customs, all of those services are available in English as well as French because we are officially a bilingual country. The province of Quebec is where we really get that strong French influence from. The people of Quebec are overwhelmingly French speaking, with about 85% of the people in Quebec speaking French as a first language, and just under half of people identifying as bilingual, being able to speak both English and French. So as soon as you land in Quebec, it's really like you've automatically, instantaneously stepped into a completely different culture. It's very different than anywhere else in Canada. Now, can you get service in English? Yes, in general, especially in Quebec City. It is a very popular location for visiting. Most services will be available in English. English does become less present as we travel out of Quebec City, but it is still a second language. It's still used by a lot of people, especially in the more busy, frequented areas. So the image that you can see here is of downtown, or what we call Old Quebec. And we're going to meet up there for the start of the trip. And the hotel that we stay at is quite accessible to all these beautiful walking locations. Now, if you get there before the trip starts, Quebec is just an amazing place to be in the summer, featuring many, many festivals and events. Just to highlight a couple of them, if you were to come in July or August, the dates are still TBD for 2022, there is a local craft beer festival, Festibière du Québec, which might be interesting to some of you. There's also a festival, it's called the New France Festival, that highlights 17th and 18th century America when the French influence was incredibly strong. This happens through August and is kind of highlighted by parades and scavenger hunts and a lot of very interesting cultural activities. There's also a Cirque du Soleil festival that happens in the summer. Lots of busy things happening through the summer in Quebec City. Now, Quebec City itself is very, very urban and developed. It feels like, you know, any other city while having those very French and somewhat European influences. But as we leave Quebec City, it does get quite a bit more rural very quickly. And if I take us to our next slide here, we're going to see another image of Quebec City, kind of now focusing in on the river. So the St. Lawrence River does run right through Quebec City. You'll be able to walk to it quite easily from the hotel if you wanted to take a nice scenic stroll along the river. And Quebec City marks as far as the tidal influence travels upriver along the St. Lawrence River. Now, this image here that we have is looking to the north, and that's where we're going to be traveling as well. So heading towards that northeast area, away from Quebec City and into those more rural, really interesting parts of Canada. So the St. Lawrence River here, I think we're all fairly familiar with the Great Lakes. Well, the Great Lakes outlet is the St. Lawrence River. Now, in its southern stretch, it actually does mark the US-Canada border. It is a very large, very busy shipping lane, but it doesn't just move ships around, it also moves whales around. It's popular not just for humans, but for wildlife as well. It's a very long river. It's almost 2,000 miles from the mouth of the river all the way to the headwaters. Or if we were just measuring the river part itself before it got to the Great Lakes, it would still be around 750 miles. The St. Lawrence River, like I said, it's a big area. It includes the traditional lands of the Nitassinan, the Abenaki, the Kanien'kehá:ka, the Mi'kmaq, the Innu, and the Wendake, as well as a number of other indigenous groups found in the area. It's a really diverse area, and it has freshwater habitats as well as marine habitat. And that Quebec area, the city of Quebec, does mark that boundary of where we go from, you know, the freshwater and brackish water into the full salinity. It's very habitated. So as we go south of Quebec City, it's one of the most densely populated areas in North America. And it's also very affected by glaciation. So the lower boundaries of the St. Lawrence River are full of what we call lacustrine deposits. So like from glacial melt water, very rich, very fertile soils, tends to be very flat. If you've ever flown into Toronto and you've seen how flat it is around there, just like that the whole way through. But then as we leave that area of what really is the river bottom, we very quickly get into what's called the Laurentian Hills. And we see some really beautiful glacially eroded hills with granite and gneiss and other shield rocks through there. So it's a very, very diverse area, even over a small space. Now, zooming in even further with this next slide, I really want to highlight the places that this trip features. So I've got a number of stars up here on the map. So that southernmost blue star is Quebec City. And as I said before, Quebec City marks the southern extent of the tidal influence in some of the saline water. And you can see that at that southern blue star there, that the river is still quite narrow. As we head north towards the areas that we're going to be visiting on this trip, the river widens quite significantly. And we are going to visit 5 separate parks on this journey, including one marine park. So our first day after we leave Quebec City takes us along the shore of the St. Lawrence estuary, up north towards a town called Tadoussac. And I've marked Tadoussac up here, or around Tadoussac, with the second blue star that is further up in the northern area. So Tadoussac is located just on the, just beside the the Saguenay-St. Lawrence Marine Park, which is where we are going to be doing our whale observation time. Now, as I go through and talk about the other places that we're going to be visiting, you see all those other yellow stars? Those are the other parks that we're going to be seeing as well. So we leave Quebec, head north, and then through the rest of the trip, work our way back south and end up in Quebec City again. So it's a very busy, varied trip, and we're going to see a lot of stuff as we go along, starting off with the Saguenay-St. Lawrence Marine Park, which is a really cool conservation area. It was only established back in 1998, and it's one of those really happy stories about ways that different levels of government can actually get along when they really want to. We have the blue area, which is a marine federal conservation area, so it's managed by the Government of Canada. We have that green area that you can see in there, which is the Saguenay Fjord National Park, that's managed by the province of Quebec. And the gray area there is what is called the cooperation area. So it's also managed by the Quebec Park Service, and it's run very, very well and very effectively for the conservation of all those marine mammal species that use this region. Now, you may be wondering, why is this such an important area? I've never heard of whales in Quebec before. What's going on there that makes this a special area? And I'm going to tell you why, because I think it's some of the coolest things about Quebec, because I think for a lot of us, even me as a Canadian, when I think about whale watching, I don't automatically look to Quebec. Like, Quebec to me feels like it's an inland area, it doesn't have a lot of coastline. I don't expect to be able to see great whale sightings there. But in fact, Quebec is blessed with about 6 months every year of thousands of whales that move into this area. And this next slide here is going to show you exactly why this is such a popular area. So this lighthouse that you can see here in this image was originally put there to mark a very shallow shoal that is located just outside that town of Tadoussac, so where we travel to do our whale watching, and really marks an interesting point in the Laurentian Channel. So the Laurentian Channel has like we've said, has a lot of those saline influences coming in. So it's getting water from the Atlantic Ocean, and those waters are very, very cold. So, 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, so about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And being cold, dense water, they travel along the bottom of the Laurentian Channel. And those waters, they're not just cold, they're also rich in decomposed organic matter, because every time fish die or algae dies or a whale poops, all of that sinks down the water column and fertilizes the bottom of the water. So all of that fertilizer is being moved in by that cold water coming into the Laurentian Channel. And when it hits this shoal, it gets abruptly brought up, and you have a tremendous amount of mixing. So we're going from 500 meters deep, so around 1,500 feet, to 20 meters deep, only about 60 feet deep, in a very, very short span. So all of that cold, rich, fertilized water is forced up to the surface by the tides, and it basically creates this garden where algae grows and blooms, which means that copepods and amphipods come in and feed on it, so different types of krill. And that brings in all those whales that we're talking about. So it's just this tremendous accumulation of zooplankton and fish that then go on to feed those marine mammals. Really unique, really beautiful and interesting place. Now, our Quebec trip features 3 journeys out on zodiacs, and depending on what time of year you come out, The zodiacs might look a little bit different because we use different providers at different times, depending what's happening. But our purpose is to get you out and see the whales in the best possible location. One of our providers that we use is Les Croisières Ecipits, and they're actually a small Indigenous-owned company that will leave out of an area just north of the town of Tadoussac and take us out to see the whales along that beautiful garden that we were just talking about. So you can see here, we're going out in zodiacs, and the zodiacs will vary in size from around a 12-person zodiac to about a 24-person. We never pack them very full. There's always lots of room to get out and move around. Comfortable, you're not elbow to elbow with people, so it's a great way to get out there. And if you've ever seen other whale watching boats, it is possible to go out there and do whale watching with a big covered boat, but that doesn't get you really right next to the whales. It doesn't get you hearing the sound of the whales breathing. We like to be out there on those small boats, able to get that close experience with those whales as much as possible. Now, what does it look like on the boat itself? Basically like this. So this is a summer excursion on a zodiac from the Croisière Ecipits, heading out to go look at whales. I remember that day. It was a great day. We saw a bunch of whales and had a fantastic time. And I've noted we were going to go on 3 trips like this. And if you're wondering to yourself, Eleanor, you said it was summer. Why is everybody dressed like they're dressed for winter? Even though we can have a beautiful summer day back on shore, really almost no matter what time of year you're heading out into the St. Lawrence Channel, that water temperature is usually fairly cold. It never gets above about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And that cold water just means that the air temperature sitting in that area is very cold as well. So the suits that we get are all provided by the companies that we're working with. And you get this beautiful look right here, all these necessary gears put out for you. Those yellow pants are a set of waterproof bibs, so no need to bring your own waterproof pants just for the sake of the boat. You will have waterproof bibs provided for you, and they are very thick, very robust bibs. No water is getting through those pants, I promise you that. The jackets serve a double purpose, so they are insulated. They have an insulated hood that can come up over your head as well. But they are also in place of life jackets. So they are survival jackets, they're flotation jackets. In the extremely unlikely event that anything happens, you don't need to be looking for life jackets. That works as a flotation vest as well. Now, you'll note here in this image here that most people have hats on. Again, just because we're sometimes moving quickly over cold water, having that warm hat on to cover your ears can just make things more comfortable. Warm gloves, waterproof gloves are really helpful as well, but that real necessary gear is all there provided for you, and it is a very comfortable way to travel out on the water. You'll be out there in August saying, I'm so hot, why am I putting all this on? And then we head out to the water and you'll see exactly why. Now, what are we going to see out on the water? Well, of course it's wildlife, so we can't guarantee anything, but we can say what is likely to be seen and what is seen most times. So this image here shows us those whales that we consider and the marine mammals that we consider the most common to be sighted at this time. So in our common sightings, we've got the harbor seal. We see those fairly often. We sometimes see a harp seal. Those are sighted mostly in the springtime and in the early summer. We can also have the gray seal, and the gray seal is the one that I've personally seen the most, especially through the peak of summer and into the fall. The small guy that looks like a little dolphin is a harbor porpoise. We have the beluga, the Minke whale, the humpback whale, the fin whale, and at the bottom there, with a kind of a little asterisk beside us, is the blue whale. Blue whales are considered occasional visitors to the St. Lawrence. They do use the St. Lawrence estuary, but they tend to stay in the more open Gulf area as opposed to moving very far up into the St. Lawrence River. So I want to take a couple of minutes and kind of point out some features of these whales and what you might be able to see when you're out there and what it looks like in the water. The Minke whale is probably one of the more common ones that is spotted. We often even see them right from the shore if you spend some time just on the rocks by the water watching out. So Minke whales are baleen whales, so they strain out plankton for food. They eat very small pieces of food. They're about 18 to 30 feet long, so while they are baleen whales and they're with the same family as like even the blue whale, they are the smallest one of that bunch. You can see they've got those throat grooves that can expand for filter feeding, and Minke whales are considered to be not at risk. So we see quite a few of them through the St. Lawrence. Again, no guarantees, but I would expect to see those while we're out. This one breaching here is fairly uncommon behavior, but I wanted to be able to show you what the full whale looks like. Now, I think not to jump to everybody's favorite one right away, but I think for a lot of folk, the humpback whale is one of their favorite whales, if not the favorites. They're very easy to pick out in the water. They have these extremely long pectoral fins. You can see in the picture there, so up to 1/3 of the length of the body. And they are known for their behavior, right? They're known for breaching, they're known for tail slapping, they're known for waving their flippers around. There's various thoughts as to why that might be happening, but they're a really cool recovery story. The humpback whales, the Atlantic humpback whales specifically, were considered an endangered group in the 1980s. And through the 1990s, there was actually only one single male humpback that visited the St. Lawrence River. Last year, 2021, was actually a banner year for humpback whales with over 100 individuals spotted, which was actually a doubling of what was seen in 2020. So an incredible bloom in the number of humpback whales that were spotted. And those humpback whales, they're very busy whales. Chances are if you see a whale breaching, if you see a whale tail slapping or getting itself out of the water, it's likely to be that humpback, and it's why it tends to be people's favorites. I do have a video. I'm going to see whether it wants to play. No promises on this one. So I'll let this one go. It came from one of our trips this summer. And I just wanted to pull it out to show you how close we can sometimes be to these whales and how many of them you can see and you can hear them. And it's a fully immersive experience as we travel along. There we go. So a lovely little fluke show with that. Okay, let's see. Okay, there we go. Now, they do breach as noted. So in 2021, we did note a lot of these really big movements coming from the whales with lots of breaches. It was something that was quite discussed in the whale community. We don't know if next year is going to be the same because last year was so incredible, but we all certainly have our fingers crossed and are waiting to see what whales show up when it gets to the springtime. Now, another common whale that is a possible sighting when you're out on the water is called the fin whale, also called the finback or the razorback whale. They are actually the second largest whale in the world, and it can be a little bit deceiving sometimes when you only see them at a distance because it just looks like you have this little blip in the water that's rolling and a fin comes out and then it goes down. Whenever we see them just bringing themselves out of the water to give a small breath, we're only seeing about 10% of the whale itself. So if we're lucky enough to have a whale swim along beside us, or go underneath us or otherwise be quite visible, you can really get a sense about how huge these animals are. So they top out around 65 feet long, around 40 to 50 tons. Quite big, and again, fairly common through the estuary. In any given year, somewhere between 20 and 80 will use the estuary, and they tend to really bunch up in that area around Tadoussac, where we're spending our time. Now, another really common one, but one that you might actually have a harder time spotting, is called the harbor porpoise. So these are they're not endangered, but they're a species of special concern in Canada. Now, the global population of these guys is actually around 700,000, so not in any immediate danger, but they're very, very small porpoises, about human-sized. They range about 4 to 6 feet long, about 100 to 140 pounds. And the reason that they've come back from a very low level in Canada is that they actually were really unfortunately bycatch in a lot of net fishing industries. So as Canada's moved away from net fishing overall, and we've been letting a number of fish stocks recover, just coincidentally then, the harbor porpoises have been recovering in number as well. So Canada still keeps them on our Species at Risk Act registry, because we know if we ever start fishing to the same extent that we did again, that these little guys might have troubles as well. They're really neat to see in the water because they tend to swim in pods like a lot of our cetaceans do. And really what you see, it just looks like a little chop in the water because they're up and down so fast that it's you see them come up, they all go down, and then it happens again, and you almost can't watch for them. You just have to have it happen. Really cool little porpoises, really nice to see. And the last one I'm going to kind of talk about as a common species that we might see is the beluga, specifically the St. Lawrence beluga. Now, while the harbor porpoise was a story of recovery, the beluga whales are still listed on the Endangered Species Act and are still making their way towards recovery. So these days, the St. Lawrence beluga population is fewer than 900 individuals, down from we think between 8 and 10,000 around 150 years ago. So belugas worldwide are not considered to be at risk. We have around 200,000 worldwide, but the St. Lawrence population is what we call a relict population. Every other beluga whale is so much further north than these guys are, but we think that the St. Lawrence belugas were probably, like our other beluga populations are now, living on the edge of the ice back when, 15,000, 20,000 years ago, we had an ice sheet moving across the continents. The St. Lawrence was an appropriate place for belugas to be. And when that ice sheet receded, that population got left behind. So it's actually quite genetically distinct from the other beluga whale populations. And it is protected now as a distinct population. So they are smaller whales. They are between 9 and 15 feet, up to around 3,500 pounds. And really, it's like nothing else when you can see them in the water. They're just so ethereal. They are this beautiful white, almost ghostly color as you can see them moving through the water. Something really, really special to see. And our trips so far have been very lucky getting sightings of these animals. Now, I don't want to leave us without talking about possible rare visitors as well, because while we have those common species that we're likely to see, we have other species that sometimes just come up and surprise us too. So we can have the long-finned pilot whale up on the top left. We have a northern bottlenose whale, the North Atlantic right whale. Oh, that would be something to see. A sperm whale. Oh my gosh, I would probably be in the water if I saw a sperm whale. There was one sighted last year, but not by us. It was just a quick sighting, so that would be very, very special. Killer whales have been known to come in. And then there's a couple of dolphins, the white-beaked dolphin, which is the one on the top left, and then the Atlantic white-sided dolphin on the top right. Hooded seals is on the very top right, and are sometimes seen. I haven't personally been able to see one yet. So these would be like bonus marine mammals. Really, really lucky if you can see them. Possible things that we have to watch out for. Now, kind of the one that I will probably lose my mind over, as well as anybody else in the boat losing their mind over, is everybody's favorite rare species to see, which is a narwhal. Since 2016, there has been a single male narwhal presence in the St. Lawrence estuary. It lives with a pod of male belugas, and it's been captured every year by drone footage, so we know it's still there. I've never personally seen it. You'd have to be very, very lucky indeed to see it, but I'm determined that some year I'm going to get to see this narwhal in the St. Lawrence. It's going to happen. Now, while whales are cool, and I think they're probably everybody's favorites, it's not just whales that we get to see while we're out. And in fact, one of the really cool things that we get in the summer is the presence of a lot of birds. Seabirds for sure, as well as a number of other migratory birds in the forests that we visit on our trail portion. I just wanted to highlight a few of these really cool seabirds that we did see through last summer. The top left up there is a common eider. So that's a male. They're quite showy, very beautiful ducks, sea ducks. On the top right is a razorbill. So they're in the auk family. They're fisher birds. They don't fly very well. They're kind of adorable. Really neat to see. Bottom left is a black-legged kittiwake. Not everybody's favorite because it looks like a seagull, but we see a lot of them, and I don't see them where I live, so I think they're pretty neat. And then the bottom right there is a gannet. So those are really beautiful large birds, and it's really, really neat to be able to get a view of one of those. Now, I should point out that really the other thing that we get in the summer that happens a little bit more reliably than we get in the fall is not just the sightings of the birds because they're there, but sighting birds and even sighting whales as well, because the fog that can happen on the St. Lawrence River is less likely to occur through the summer because of that warm, even hot summer air keeps that fog away. So while it absolutely is wonderful and it's beautiful and it's something else to be out there in the fog and just hear whales blowing around you, it's so otherworldly and amazing. It can also be really nice to not have fog and to be able to see all these things. So definitely a summer advantage there with the fog. Now, we're going to move on from talking about whales a little bit, but I wanted to point out the town that we stay in while we're up doing those whale trips. So this is the town of Tadoussac. It's not the only beautiful thing that we've got here. It's we got the whales, we got the town. It's a gorgeous area. That red roofed hotel that you can see right in the middle there is Hotel Tadoussac, which is where we're going to be staying for a couple of nights. Has a beautiful view right over the water of the St. Lawrence, gorgeous in the summer. I took this photo here in August that you can see. The grass, as you can see on the lawn, is quite dry. Quebec, like a lot of Canada, had very below average rainfalls last summer, and a lot of places just let their lawns die out instead of watering them. So this is what it can look like in August in a dry year. You can sit out there on the lawn and look out at the St. Lawrence River and watch the whales, watch for whales, watch for seals. It's really a special place. Now, as we leave the whale section behind and start getting into our hiking and walking portion, I wanted to talk for a minute about kind of what walks in Quebec can look like, because while this is a walking trip and we get to go out and see different things, it's a whale trip as well. It's a really nice, well-rounded trip, I think. Now, preface here, I'm Canadian, but I'm from the part of Canada where, if you've ever been to like the Midwest of the US, we're kind of like that. We're flat. Everything is flat. It's just flat everywhere. Flat, flat, flat. Quebec is not like that. Quebec has hills, and nearly every trail that exists in Quebec has at least a little bit of elevation change. It can be a very minor amount or it can be a lot. And I put up a couple of 3 or 4 photos here to kind of show you what some of the trails look like that we access, but also to acknowledge the fact that, you know, everybody's body is different. Everybody's body can do different things, and what your body can do one day might not want to do another day. One of the real advantages of this trip is that we've always got a couple of guides on it so that we can split up groups as necessary, so that those who want to take a shorter walk or a flatter walk or stop and smell the flowers have the opportunity to do that. Or if you want to do a bit more of a scramble to head up to the top of a crater to get a great view over the landscape, that could be an option as well. So while they all have a little bit of up and down, some can have a lot, depending how you want to go through that day. So the first 3 days of our trips are really all about the whales, but we also do take some time to walk into Saginay Fjord National Park. And that fjord has its outlet right into the St. Lawrence by Tadoussac. So it's part of that protected area that I was talking about as that Saguenay-St. Lawrence Marine Park. And the area of the fjord that we're going to head to looks like this. It's called Bay Saint Marguerite. It's a really beautiful place, like I said, part of the park, where we can sometimes, if we get really lucky, potentially also see whales even from this walk. So we have here an image of, this is the Saguenay Fjord, which will then have an outlet into the St. Lawrence. So the fjord, being a fjord, has saline influence. And then that bay that we see up on the top right is Bay Saint Marguerite, has a lovely walking trail that goes along it. And this bay is it's actually a nursery for beluga whales. So those colored rings that you can see are where a high number of beluga whale sightings happen every year. It's where the calving happens and where they stay to raise their young for the first part of the year. And it's best seen in the summer, because as we get into the fall, those beluga whales will actually move out of the Bay Saint Marguerite and into the river itself. Still a beautiful walk either way, and you always have a chance of spotting beluga whales, but the nursery portion, like when they're spending time with their newborn calves, that really does happen through those summer months. And Quebec, the national parks of Quebec, the government of Quebec, as well as the federal government, have done such a great job of protecting this area. Belugas are one of the most studied whale species in the area. And that area where we see those beluga whale sightings is actually fully closed to everybody during the time that it's operational as a nursery. When we're out going on walks or when we're out on boats, we frequently see people doing science. It's a very sciencey area. There's a lot of marine research that happens here. Everything from acoustics to studying whale hormones or hormones in the water, sampling whale breath to check for any indicators of stress or what they're eating. They do aerial surveys, so you might see drones up in the air when they're counting whales. They have a marine mammal emergency response network. There's so much happening out there all the time with whales. One of the things that we're likely to encounter when we're out with the whales, whether it's out looking at belugas or out on the boats, that we'll likely kind of get hands-on with a little bit, is some of the photo identification. And probably a lot of you have heard of this before. So in the St. Lawrence, photo identification has been used since the 1930s on specifically humpback whales. And it helps us kind of recognize individual whales as well as relationships that those whales have with other whales. All of the boat operators that we use are part of an organization called the Eco-Whale Alliance that was created in 2011 that works to encourage environmentally responsible whale watching in the marine park. So it's always working to continually improve the whale watching practices. And they often have researchers actually come out on the boats so that they are observing how people work around the boats, how the whales are moving around the boats. They're taking photos of humpbacks and other whales to match up against historical records. So It's an incredibly scientifically active area, and it's just endlessly fascinating to me how much is happening every day with these whales that we see, but also that we don't see. So unfortunately, and we always feel this way in person as well, we do have to leave the whales behind at some point and head into the rest of the trip, which is what we'll talk about now, and head a little bit south, but not too far south, into an area called the Charlevoix Biosphere Reserve. If you've heard about biosphere reserves before, so they're recognized by the UN, and they work to promote solutions that reconcile conservation of biodiversity with sustainable use. So there's a number of them around Canada, and there's several hundred around the world. They always have a core protected area, like a national park, for example. Then they've got kind of an area around that core area that has light human use, like small scale farms, environmentally responsible tourism operators, that kind of thing. And then beyond that is your buffer zone to get into the real world. The Charlevoix Biosphere Reserve was recognized in 1988 because of its unique geomorphology. It's actually a meteor impact site that's had a tremendous impact on what happens there in terms of the soils that have formed and what we've been able to farm. It's also recognized because of its traditional knowledge, the inherent beauty, and its unique characteristics. So it is known not just for its national parks that we're going to visit, but also for its high quality food, high quality wine, and the high quality beer that it produces. So all very important things in our world. The first place that we're going to stay when we're there is a hotel called the Fairmont Le Manoir Richelieu. So this is a beautiful Fairmont hotel. It was originally built in 1899, rebuilt in the late 1920s. We spend 2 days here while we explore 2 more parks. That being said, if you prefer to stay at the Fairmont and enjoy the spa and the various amenities that the Fairmont offers, you can always do that, because every trip is a little bit of choose your own adventure. But if you come along with us to the parks, the first park that we're going to visit from here is called the Parc National des Hautes Gorges de la Rivière Malbaie, which is roughly translates as the high gorges of the Malbaie River, which is one of the centerpieces of the Biosphere Reserve. So it's not actually gorges, because gorges are formed by rivers. The High Gorge Park was actually formed by glaciers, but that's okay. It's still really beautiful. It has some incredibly tall rock faces. And even though it's a narrow park, because it's centered around the river, because it has these very high rock faces, we encounter a number of different habitats stratified by the altitude. It's a really neat park. I love visiting there. There are no cars permitted in the park during the summer months. So we get to hop on the shuttle bus and explore by foot and also by boats, like a canoe or a kayak. So the Malbaie River is quite shallow, so it's a very safe and fun river to explore. We tend not to get very strong winds because it's got those protective gorges around it. And the water is thankfully quite a bit warmer than the St. Lawrence River. It's suitable for swimming, canoeing, whatever you like to do in it. So the canoes that we use and the kayaks, there's usually a variety to choose from, whether you want a single or a double kayak or to go out in a canoe. We'll have folks on hand to help out with that, and it's a really fun experience. We're not trying to get anywhere, we're just trying to enjoy the water, enjoy the day and our company, and to see the land from the water, I think, is always a special way of doing it. Different way of moving across the landscape. There are some walks in the park that we can go on as well, so we'll have options depending on what the weather is that day, what people want to do, but I do recommend heading out by boat. It is a nice way to travel. The second park that we're going to visit in this region is called the Pak Destination des Grands Jardins. So it's like the Big Gardens National Park. So it's another protected area in the Charlevoix Biosphere Reserve. And it's a really unique area. We find young forests in here. We find mature forests, as well as a type of habitat called taiga. Taiga is a spruce lichen forest that we can see here in the image that normally is found hundreds of miles away from here. So it's very much like a northern subarctic type of habitat. And we get this little tiny pocket of it at the Grand Jardin National Park. Really neat spot. It doesn't look like anywhere else that we visit on that trip. Got some beautiful walks there as well. The park itself has been highly affected by fire in certain areas. So we get to see everything from young forest to old forest as we move through the park. Now, the next hotel that we moved to is called Manoir Lac de Lage, and the Manoir is actually quite close to Quebec City. So we'll be here for a couple of nights. Kind of, if I panned the camera over when I was taking this picture, you would see the Lac de Lage, which is Lake de Lage. It's a small lake. We have the option of taking canoes or kayaks out here as well. You can swim. There are many people who swim. There's a spa on site. There are hot tubs and pools. It's another beautiful hotel with absolutely fantastic cuisine. I can't talk up the food enough on this trip, honestly. It is a wonderful area to come and eat your way through and then go walk the food off, I tell you. From Lac de Lage, we have another park to explore still, which is the Jacques Cartier National Park. And this is the river here that runs through the park. It is, again, surprise, surprise, it's a beautiful area. It has some rapids, it's got some slow moving rivers. It's a great place also to see birds. If you're a birder, we see over 130 bird species in here in the summer. We may see some other animals as well. They tend to be less easily spotted at this point because we are closer to Quebec City. It's actually not been a park since, it's only been a park since 1981. The Quebec Park Service overall is a fairly young park service. So a lot of the parks that we move through are relatively recent additions to the park network. It's, like I said, another beautiful park. It's got salmon, it's got trout, it's got birds. It's just beautiful. So after we go through Jacques Cartier, we come back to Lac de Lage and we are going to have a farewell dinner at the Manoir Lac de Lage. From Lac de Lage, the next morning we transfer back to Quebec City, whether you are heading out by plane or train or heading back to your car or choosing to spend more time in Quebec City. So it takes us on this beautiful loop going up along the St. Lawrence River, getting that experience with the whales, and then all of this time in the park in the second half of the trip. I've been lucky enough to head out on this trip last year. I'm so looking forward to it this year as well. And I would love to answer any questions that people have about this itinerary.
All right, thank you, Eleanor. Now, before we start the question and answer session, I'd like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in the control panel. All right, with that, let's get to it. Now, we saw a picture of everybody out on the boat and all that protective gear, but we didn't talk about footwear. What kind of footwear should we have, and is any provided?
Footwear is not provided for the boat. One of the recommended packing items for this trip, whether you're coming in summer or the fall, is a good pair of waterproof hiking boots. Because while my pictures are all taken with beautiful sunny days, and there was a drought last year, so we actually did have beautiful sunny days, we can have rain as well. And we find that those, if you have a good pair of waterproof hiking boots, that those are adequate to head out in on the boat as well. We do often get a bit of splash coming back into the boat. Having a spare pair of socks to change into is never a bad idea, but we had everybody in their waterproof boots, and I don't think anybody ended up with wet feet at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. Good advice. Now, what about if I get a little seasick? Am I going to have much of a problem on this whale watch?
Well, it's definitely, you know your own body best. If you tend towards motion sickness, I would advise speaking with whatever healthcare provider you usually go to for advice on whether taking something like a scopolamine patch on the boat is right for you. Because we're traveling in Zodiacs, they are kind of small boats, and the weather can get choppy. Like, we don't head out if it's dangerously windy, but we will head out if it's windy or rainy, or, you know, the whales don't care if it's raining up above. The whales will be there anyway. So we often find that because you're being in small boats can actually be easier for people with motion sickness, because you're not just experiencing the motion, you can see the horizon, you can feel the wind in your face. It does help to mitigate some of that feeling. But if you're one of those folks who it doesn't matter what's going on, you know, finding something to take and talking with a healthcare provider about best options for that are great choices.
Agreed. Now, how long do we spend on the whale boat?
Yeah, we're usually out for somewhere between 2 to 3 hours on each boat expedition. So it's usually 2 hours out, but, you know, sometimes if we see a really cool thing happening, we might stay out a little bit longer. So it's usually right about the amount of time that you decide that a bathroom is much more important than ever seeing whales again, and it's time to head back to shore.
Of course, human nature. Now, how are the whales protected from ship strikes?
So I won't scroll back through all the images, but one of the pictures I brought up at the beginning showed you the St. Lawrence Saguenay Marine Park, including the protected area. And it showed that the Saguenay Fjord was part of that marine protected area, as well as the west side of the St. Lawrence Channel in that area. So ships are able to use, and as we know, like, so much shipping heads through the St. Lawrence River. Ships are able to use the eastern side as not a protected area. However, I know that whales, smart as they are, they can't read, they don't know what's a protected area and what's not. So there's a few things that get put in place. And it also depends on what kind of whales we're talking about. For something like the North Atlantic right whale, which is an incredibly endangered species and very, very heavily managed in Canada as well as in the US, they actually have a huge network of things, including drones, including human spotters. And whenever whales are seen or spotted or automatically heard through a series of acoustic listening devices, right, because they can pick up on a specific whale's call, they send out immediate flags to all vessels in the vicinity, a go slow order, so that they are not able to travel above a speed of, I think, is 3 to 4 knots. Very, very slow. Because North Atlantic right whales are also very, very slow. They do not move out of the way of ships very well. Within that marine protected area, the idea is to have a basic understanding of where whales are all the time. So there are various networks set up, whether it's, you know, whale watching boats chatting with each other over the radio. For example, those beluga whales are protected. When beluga whales are spotted, there are immediate changes that have to happen to boat behavior. So they have to maintain distance, they have to maintain speed, they have to maintain direction. So that order or that call goes out to everybody in the area. Okay, beluga whales here, everybody goes into the beluga whale protocol. So there are specific protocols for endangered or species at risk. And then there's our general protocols for just being generally aware of what whales are where. Nobody wants to hit a blue whale. If there's a blue whale in the channel, the call goes out to all the boats in the area to be aware, to slow down. And basically the best thing boats do is go slow, because when a boat's going slow enough, the whale just has the opportunity to move out of the way of the ship.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Now, are the St. Lawrence belugas, are these the same ones that we'll see up in Churchill as well?
Well, not the same individuals, but the same species. So they're all considered belugas. They would be able to interbreed if you got them into the same area. Because the St. Lawrence population is completely separated, there's no gene flow between the St. Lawrence and the Churchill population or the Alaska population. we consider them as a group to be separate because they have to be managed differently. You can't, like if for example, you had a catastrophic event and somehow, I don't know, let's just go with oil spill. If there was an oil spill that took out 10% of the population of the St. Lawrence belugas, they wouldn't be able to replenish that from elsewhere. If that were to happen in Churchill, heaven forbid, right, those Churchill whales have other populations as well that could move into the area that could replenish that population. St. Lawrence, what you have is what you got. You're not going to get any more coming from anywhere else. So yes, same species, no different population, very, very different management needed for the St. Lawrence. They just have so many things that have worked against them historically that they seem to be, they're clawing their way back, but they had a long fall that they're clawing their way back from.
Are they in danger from PCBs in the river as well?
Yeah, so the St. Lawrence population, especially because it's in such a heavily industrialized area, has been recorded over the decades as being very, very heavily impacted by things like PCBs, other industrial effluents. Really anything that gets made or shipped in the Great Lakes has a chance of impacting the beluga whales. You know, it got a lot of attention maybe 10, 15 years back because it was publicized because it was true that if a beluga whale were to wash up on shore, it couldn't just be left be as like to be picked over by carrion and enter back into the circle of life. It had to be treated as hazardous waste because the levels of PCBs and other chemicals were so high that it couldn't actually be left out like so. We know that even by the time, like when beluga whale mums are nursing their calves, they're already getting like a load of heavy metals and of other chemicals just in mother's milk going to the calves. So while things have, like, well, I don't want to sugarcoat it, because things are rough for the St. Lawrence belugas. Like I say, it's quite the uphill battle for them. There have also been incredible improvements in the conservation, not just of how boats are moving around belugas, but also in how we are managing things like water quality between the US and Canada, to make sure that those whales are more protected than they have been for over 100 years.
Well, that's really great news to hear. Now let's talk about the hikes for just a moment. Now, are walking sticks or hiking sticks, are they allowed to be brought with us?
Yeah, hiking sticks are absolutely allowed. Now, Quebecers as a whole, it's a very outdoorsy kind of culture. The parks are, not only are the parks, they can be busy, though I'm told that it's not busy like national parks in the US gets. It's a whole different level. It's busy to me as a Canadian. But what it means is that they've got fantastic facilities. So if you decide not to travel with hiking poles, they can actually be rented at all of these parks. They just have them available for rent at the kiosks upon park entry. If you find that you're somebody who likes having poles all the time, absolutely bring your own. I know that for me, I like poles because I get distracted by things like birds and butterflies, and I twist around and next thing I know, my feet aren't where I thought they were. So poles can be extremely useful if you're used to walking with them. I would not say that they are necessary for your average person anywhere. They would only be necessary for you if poles are always necessary for you.
And are there restroom facilities if we're going on these hikes in the park?
Yes. So again, the parks are quite well serviced. So there are restroom facilities in many locations. Everything, you know, from our beautiful flush toilets that we get at the kiosks to more rustic facilities that we have along walks. But there are places that you can answer the call of nature in a private fashion.
That's good to know as well. And how long into the season? I mean, is summertime a good time to see flower displays? Excuse me.
Yeah, wildflowers, depending on what species we're talking about, most of them tend to peak in, well, our peak numbers are always going to be in July because that's just the way summer in the Northern Hemisphere works. They have to have time to open their flowers, to set seed before winter comes. Do we see flowers into late July and August? 100% absolutely. As we get towards mid to late August, most things are done at that point, but we still do get wildflower displays of specific like late summer species, things like the asters and a number of other ones that tend to peak later in the summer. We do get those into late July, early August as well.
Great. Thanks for that. Unfortunately, that's the last question that we have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you have.
All right, well, thanks. Thanks, Rob, and thanks everybody for coming in. I thank you so much for the opportunity to tell you about this trip. I hope you can tell that I think it's just really wonderful and fantastic, and I hope to get the chance to meet some of you out there in the future in Quebec and in the Quebec parks.
Thank you, Eleanor, for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with us this summer and experience the beluga, bears, and summer wildlife of Churchill trip, give us a call at the number on your screen or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.